Hello, I'm Jenny Murray. I'm from Shetland, and I worked at Shetland Museum for the past 20 years. I've been curator of collections for the past 10, but I'm on a long career break at the moment as I've just started a PhD with the UHI. Thank you for inviting me to give a paper, enabling me to share my obsession with old ploughs, and I hope at the end of this you'll be fascinated with them too. So I'll just share my screen. Okay. My interest in ancient cultivation tools came about when I was studying for a Master's in Art and Shetland Studies with the Institute of Northern Studies, UHI, and was looking for a research subject for my dissertation. Working at Shetland Museum, I was intrigued by a large and very long box of wooden artifacts in the museum store. The box contained a group of wooden artifacts that had been dug up from the peat moor. From donations spanning a century, these wooden items had received little attention other than their initial conservation at their time of discovery. The spark of interest was well and truly lit, so I invited my supervisor, Dr. Simon Clark, to come to the museum store and have a look at the contents of this box with me, the majority of which were cultivation tools. Simon has studied Roman Iron Age society in Britain and is well versed in ritual behaviour, and he hinted that these tools may have been buried for a special reason, and how right he was. And so I set off on an amazing journey of discovery. For the first half of this paper, we will look at these tools individually. The artifacts that form the basis of my research had all been discovered by people cutting peats. Initially, it was planned to concentrate on the 4 confirmed cultivation tools. The early ard, seen here, it's an ard or plough from Dunrossness, 2 wooden foot ploughs or early spades, and a clod breaker, all from the North Isles of Yell and Unst in Shetland. But as my research widened and the radiocarbon dates arrived back from East Kilbride, it became apparent to us that the majority of this assemblage were the components of a much bigger story, not just here in Shetland, but further south in Scotland and also Denmark and Scandinavia. The initial data gathering of the Shetland material included a search of the museum records to establish the provenance of each item. Some had detailed find locations, including grid references. Others, especially early donations from the Borough collection, which is a Shetland collection from the Victorian period, so pre-Shetland Museum, had little information other than they were found by peat cutters in the moor. This included the 2 foot ploughs and the clod breaker, so a bit more detective work was required to ascertain their source. A search of the Shetland archives records revealed a glimmer of hope when a correspondence between Andrew Williamson from Yell to Edwin Seymour Tate came to light. Here's James Williamson, sorry. Reed Tate was a well-known collector of Shetland documents and artifacts, and as there was no museum in the islands at this time, people finding curious items would contact local experts like Reed Tate, who could explain the object's history and who often bought these items of cultural interest to add to his own personal collection. This letter to Reed Tate revealed that the foot plough had been found at Dalster in Yell by Mr. Williamson. You can see him holding it up. It was about 1925. The next thing to do was to note the full construction details of the collection, including the type of wood used. Wood identification would be required before radiocarbon dating could be done. So samples of each item, very tiny samples, were taken and sent to dendrochronologist Dr. Niels Bonde in Copenhagen. Arrangements were then made at the local hospital to have the foot plough and one of the ard stilts put through the CT scanner. The CT scan generates a unique 3-dimensional image without causing any physical harm to the object. The Yell foot-plough and the Ard stilt were carefully conveyed to the Gilbert Bain Hospital in Lerwick and were unwrapped and guided through the CT scanner. You can see me here with the radiographer. Now, some people might think this is an awful waste of NHS resources and wonder why we were allowed to do this while there's many patients waiting for scans. But the consultant explained that they regularly calibrate the scanner, so test runs without a patient have to be done, and this offered us this window of opportunity. The radiographer explained that even the tiniest particle of metal in the construction would shine brightly on scanning, but no metal was found, so we could be secure that these items were constructed wholly of wood. What the scanner did confirm was that the items were made from driftwood, as teredo or shipworm burrows could clearly be seen. And you can see that this is the blade on the screen, which shows wear at its tip. So now we will look more closely at the collection of tools studied. The 3 Ard components in the museum collection were uncovered by a Mr. Grains while cutting his peats at Virdifield, Dunrossness in 1965. Found at a depth of 6 feet, so almost 2 meters, the Ard beam, which is this bit here, was placed in the middle with 2 stilts. This is one of the stilts here, the other is here. They were placed in the moor with the beam in the middle and a stilt at either side, so the whole having the appearance of being buried deliberately. These stilts in the Ard beam were identified as spruce or larch. The Ard beam seen here has a mortised hole cut in which the rope would go in. And this would be attached from this point to a splinter bar and then yoked animals in front. The working end of the Ard looks like this. The stone share would help to break the ground, but also offer some protection from wearing out the wooden stilt underneath. So you have this piece underneath and then this large pointed stone. The stilts narrow towards the handle end, which is shaped for the hand grip, and these showed evidence of wear by the person who was steering the plough. To help date these ancient tools, typology can be very helpful to see if there are any similarities. These studies showed that the Virdifield stilts are similar in composition to others uncovered in Northern Europe and Scotland. The most recent discovery of an Ard stilt is from Milton Loch in Dumfries and Galway, which shows very similar dimensions to the Shetland ones. And I have to thank Dr. Anne Crone for allowing me to use that photo. It's also very similar to the Milton Loch and stilt on display in Edinburgh, in the National Museum in Edinburgh. The majority of ancient Ards or ploughs are to be found in Denmark. Like these, and like the Virdifield Ard, they are all found preserved in peat bogs. Here is a similar example from Dustrup in Jutland. Samples were taken from the Shetland Ard beam and one of the stilts, and these were sent to East Kilbride for dating. The 2 Virdifield components were dated, showing a range of between 20 years. They were constructed just 20 years apart. The Ard beam indicating a calibrated date of 480 BC and the stilt 460 BC. So the beginning of what's Shetland's Iron Age period, which we see is about 500 BC to 500 AD. This dating evidence suggests that the Virdifield Ard is contemporary with the 2 Scottish examples that have been scientifically dated, as well as 3 from Denmark, and the dates suggest that they were the late Bronze Age and Iron Age period. Now, I'm hoping that you are all still with me at this point, because the last time I gave this paper to a live audience, there were loud snores to be heard in various corners of the lecture theatre, so I'm hoping you're still with me. So we move on to the yoke. Traditionally in Shetland, oxen and horses were used to pull the plough, but prehistoric evidence would suggest that the draft animal of choice was oxen, and this is supported by cattle bones found during archaeological excavations, such as those at Ness of Gruting and Clod of Brewster. The Shetland yoke is almost identical to the Bronze Age sample found in the peat moor at Loch Ness in Argyll, and this has been dated to around 1700 BC. Again, another was discovered in a peat bog in Orkney in the 1860s. It has also been dated to the Bronze Age. As mentioned before, the rope from the plough to the yoke was separated by a splinter bar, or ammel, as it's known in Shetland. And this is the one in the Shetland collection, and this is a modern one showing you the similarities. The yard would normally be pulled by one or two beasts, and ropes at either end of the bar ran towards each flank of the animal, and a third rope secured to the middle of the bar ran to the opposite direction to secure it to the yard beam. The splinter bar is the part of the harness that enables this attachment to work evenly while the ploughing is being done. And this, as you can see it here, this one was in action in 1920, but the splinter bar can be seen here. Found 3 to 4 foot down in the peat in a peat bank at Araclett in Bixter in 1953, our splinter bar had been mistakenly recorded in the museum record as a barrel stave, but when we examined it with new eyes, we could see that it was actually what it was, and as this slide shows, you can clearly see where the ropes had been attached at each end, and you can see the deep wear caused by the ropes. The splinter bar is constructed, and as I could find no prehistoric splinter bars to compare it with, scientific dating was definitely warranted, and radiocarbon dates showed it was comparable with other Shetland ploughing equipment with an Iron Age date of 200 BC. So now we move on to the foot-ploughs, or spades. These two almost identical implements were discovered in the peat moor on Yellin Unst. That's the Northern Isles in Shetland archipelago. Both spades have circular sectioned handles fixed to rectangular sectioned blades, being joined by two flat wooden pegs mortised right through both portions, and projecting at the top, seen here in the next slide. The footstep on each spade shows considerable wear. You can see that here. Considerable wear, suggesting that these implements were well used before being deposited into the bog. The wood used for its construction was sea-driven again, evident from the numerous Teredo worm burrows noted on the CT scanning. A sample from the Yell spade was sent to the laboratory for dating and returned a date much earlier than we had anticipated, around 570 AD, because it was thought that these spades were medieval. But this is in keeping with our Iron Age dates received for the other agricultural equipment, albeit that these tools were deposited in the later Iron Age period. The Unst spade was found by a peat cutter somewhere in the north side of the isle, buried alongside the wooden Clod breaker or mattock. They were handed to Dr. Thomas Saxby, a well-known local antiquarian, around 1900. And using typological evidence, the Shetland spades appear quite unique. The eminent scholar, the late Professor Sandy Fenton, suggested that the Shetland spades may be descendants of the Gaelic caschrom. Apologies to any Gaelic speakers in the audience. And suggests that scientific dating would be a useful tool to understanding the evolution of the spade use in Scotland. Later Gaelic caschrons, or crooked spades, from the northwest of Scotland and the Hebrides are very similar in shape, as you can see, but these have a metal blade, unlike the Shetland spades. The Highland Folk Museum in Kingussie has early examples of the caschron in their collection, as seen here. Here's it. Looking east to Scandinavia, Fenton compares the spades to the Norwegian crock spade or nabba spade, although he acknowledges that they are merely comparable due to their ability to undercut and lever up turf. They were used until the mid-19th century, but were probably in use from the early medieval times. The Norwegian Folk Museum also houses an implement comparable in form, but again its construction is very different. The heel spade, that's this one here, the heel spade has a metal blade attached here and was used in Norway until 1900. There are a few examples of ancient wooden spades from northwest Europe, including these early models from the Satrup bog in Schleswig. These were made of one piece of wood with a triangular shaped blade and have been dated, they're much earlier and dated to 3000 BC. But as you can see, they don't resemble the Shetland spades at all. Found buried with the Unst spade, as mentioned before, was this clod breaker or mattock. Again, it is constructed of spruce or larch. The handle is mortised through the crescent-shaped head, which is held tight using a wooden pin. I couldn't find anything comparable to this wooden implement in the literature studied, so radiocarbon dating again was a priority. And once again, the dates came back to our Iron Age period with a date of AD 230. And now for the mystery item, and I hope if any of you can have seen anything like this before or recognize it or have thoughts on what it might be, please let me know. The oldest dated tool is this what could be a handle. It was uncovered from the moor again in Unst. The handle is constructed from a natural round sapling, which has been squared off, then tapered to a wedge end where something has been attached by a leather thong, of which 4 small fragments survive. 5 shallow grooves remain in the wood where the thonging was attached. Here. As the handle was in such good condition, it would have been detrimental to remove a sample of the wood for dating. So it was therefore decided a portion of the leather thong would be sent to the lab, and an early calibrated date of 885 BC was returned, placing it in our Bronze Age period. So why were these cultivation tools buried in the peat moor? They represent a collection of everyday items required for the cultivation and the processing of food. They are an interesting group, each discovered in the same contextual circumstances, in deep moor and various locations throughout Shetland, from the most northerly islands of Yelland Unst to the southerly regions of Dunrossness. We need to ask the question, why were these objects buried in the moor? Could these tools have been left behind after a day's work but never retrieved? Even today, tuiskers can be found in the hill, ready for the next day's work, as we found one day when one of my colleagues and I were walking through the hills and we found 2 tuiskers lying ready by the peats for the next day. I won't tell you where in Shetland this is in case that you're tempted to go and pinch one, because tuiskers today are nearly as rare as hen's teeth. This may be a possible explanation, but the find locations for each cultivation tool would suggest otherwise. The odd parts were found in areas that are away from arable land. Likewise, the spades were found on high hillsides, far from arable ground on the lower slopes. I would argue that had they been left lying exposed in the hill, like an accidental loss, it would have taken years for the peat to cover them, causing some drying and warping of the wood. As you can see, a piece of wood here has been left in the hill. On examinations, the tools showed no signs of this disintegration. They were perfectly preserved by the anaerobic conditions offered by peat moor. So there must be another reason, and I suggest that the Shetland tools have been deliberately placed in the moor as ritual offerings. Ritual deposition of tools and everyday objects are well known throughout prehistory. When Charles Calder, a surveyor for the Royal Commission, came to Shetland in the 40s and 50s, he excavated Neolithic remains on the west side of Shetland and found the house walls were simply littered with rudimentary stone tools. 600 were recovered from the Ness of Gruting and a further 250 from Steinydale. Built into the core of the wall in one of the houses at Ness of Gruting, Calder found half of a broken quern stone, and you can see it's been obviously broken in half, and a deposit of 28 pounds of carbonized barley, indicative of a votive offering. Calder suggests that these were placed at the time of the house construction, as there is no evidence that the wall core filling had been tampered with to add a later deposit. Was the grain and broken quern deposited to ensure happiness and fertility to the newly built dwelling? Similar deposition of cultivation implements into the fabric of the house is also noted in Lewis in the Western Isles. Similarly, clearance cairns from surrounding field systems in all the areas looked at by Calder also contained deposits of stone tools. One local man who demolished a clearance cairn at Lower Gruniquoy collected 26 stone tools. Were these perhaps an offering to higher powers to ensure future successful harvests from these fields? Ritual deposition carries on throughout prehistory, with the offerings of items with cultivation connotations linked with agriculture and human fertility, becoming more evident from the Bronze Age and through into the Iron Age period. These offerings are often placed into wetland localities, often bogs, streams, rivers, or lakes. While discussing sacred landscapes, Nigel Pennock, a specialist in ritual, notes that natural waters such as springs and streams and ponds were ensouled with indwelling spirits that must be acknowledged and nurtured. Writer on Scottish prehistory, Alistair Moffat notes that such places like the hilltops are liminal places on the cusps of two worlds, the one where we exist and the underworld, or the sky and the world of the gods. He also suggests that this may be a significant reason why Iron Age crannocs were built on lakeside locations, a place to live, that was spiritually charged. We cannot live without water and its life-giving properties, and so it's understandable that it would be afforded such sanctity, a primary and essential source for our existence. Wells appear to have been equally important. A plank-built well was uncovered in the Smedrock bog in Jutland, where so many of the Danish finds were deposited in that bog. This has been regarded as a votive well from the late Bronze Age and is believed to emphasize the sacred character of the bog. Excavators finding complete pots at the bottom of wells in Neatham, a Roman Iron Age hamlet in East Hampshire, interpreted these as votive offerings made as the well was being sunk below the water table. Archaeologist Ian Armott reports that many Iron Age hill forts, such as Barry Hill and Finnevin in Scotland, surround large wells or cisterns, which may be used for ritual activity as well as the obvious utilitarian source of water. Brochs from the same period in Caithness, Orkney, and Shetland encircled deep, elaborate wells, with steps leading down into them. In 2015, the fine folk from Archaeology Shetland and Scape uncovered a beautifully built well inside a broch here at Channerwick in Shetland. And here's Dr. Simon Clark digging himself in. Archaeologist Anna Ritchie has argued that these various wells within brochs, such as Ness and Midhow in Orkney, could have been oracles through which a god may speak. Excavations at Minehow in Orkney revealed a deep shaft down the centre of a mound with 29 steps leading to a well-like chamber at the bottom. Believed to be a cistern, this may have been a place associated with an Iron Age water cult. Because of the complexity of its architecture and location, its use as a well appears unlikely. Rather, it was the site of religious significance, a sacred place where Iron Age Arcadians could be in touch with the underworld. Analysis of soil around Midhow suggests that the monument was surrounded with a boggy landscape, and this may be in keeping with the religious significance of an assumed water cult. If water was therefore a sacred element of Iron Age ideology, it is comprehensible that wet landscapes would play a significant role in that belief system. The group of artifacts discussed in this study are all from this type of context, a significant landscape in Iron Age Shetland. Similar finds of agricultural equipment in other countries, especially the bogs of Jutland, suggest that these were not buried in the moor for practical purposes, but as a security measure in the hope of a successful harvest. With deteriorating climate conditions and pressures on good arable land here in Shetland, divine intervention was perhaps required, keeping the gods on your side. Single offerings could be seen as a symbolic event, which in effect, if effective and you had a bumper harvest, would be repeated the following year. Danish Iron Age specialist Lotte Heidegger argues that it is through this repetitive behaviour that rituals become a tradition within society, become an important part of the community's self-consciousness and the social identity of the individuals involved. These rites are a way of dealing with the anxieties of nature that is out with human control. Changes are noted in ritual behaviour from the Bronze Age period. While bronze weaponry was the selected item in the early period, changes emerged from the Middle Bronze Age onwards, when deposition of agricultural equipment becomes a more dominant theme. And Heidegger suggests this shift in ritual communication with a complete change of depositional material may highlight a new ideology within the Iron Age society. Previous trade networks were necessary for the importation of materials for bronze and metalwork, but as iron ore is more readily available, perhaps communities such as Orkney and Shetland were becoming more insular. While it may be easier to have sourced iron, wood was becoming an expensive commodity in the islands, with its intrinsic value increasing. Our wooden agricultural items being deposited in the moor would have been extremely high value items. Danish archaeologist Professor Peter Glob noted that the majority of Scandinavian deposits were offered to sacred bogs, the mainstream being small saucer bogs, often in high-lying areas, and the rest offered to larger bogs. While all of the Shetland tools were found in wet and boggy locations, unfortunately some of the exact find spots are not known, so a complete study of the depositional locations was not possible. For those that have a definite find location, a survey of the area was essential to confirm if their deposition mirrored those of their Scandinavian neighbours. So let's look here at where our tools were found. The bog at Araclett on the west side of Shetland mainland is where the splinter bar was recovered. It lies in a valley between two hills, one of which supports the remains of a large Neolithic chambered cairn. This small saucer bog is situated on high ground, which offers a panoramic view of the surrounding landscape and the sea to the south. Writing about sacred landscapes, Pennock notes that the mountains and hilltops were special liminal points, home to higher heavenly beings, yet still rooted in the earth. The hilltops appear to be revered in this area, as there are numerous cairns on the surrounding hills to the west. The cairn on the top of the hill of Araclett may have been an important visible marker, a sacred spot in the landscape where the ancestors would have been included in the ceremonial rites. These cairns appear to have also played a part in ritual activity, as excavations in Shetland cairns reveal art points, flake stone bars and stone tools built into their fabric. Now we move on to the hill of Sneug in Yale. The topography here at the hill of Sneug above Dalster is very similar to Araclett. The wooden foot spade was found in the bog on the top of this hill, and from here you have commanding views of the surrounding landscape, with the sea lying below again to the south. Looking west, you can see Runnis Hill in the distance, where Shetland's largest Neolithic cairn is situated. And to the north, you see Saxford Hill in Unst, you can just see it here, which is at one time supported 5 very early Neolithic cairns. There are no prehistoric remains visible in the immediate vicinity of where the spade was found, but although the peat here is so deep, it may be well hidden. At Virdifield in Dunrossness, where the ard components were found, is a large boggy area between Leavenwick and Clumley. With two broch sites nearby, the Ordnance Survey map also notes homesteads, burnt mounds, and a cist in the surrounding fields. To the east of the bog, the landscape slopes down to the sea, and it's very much sheltered to the west by the high ridge of hills, including the wart of Scoosborough. The yard was located to the west of the bog, quite near to the burn of Daleswater, seen here, which courses across the moor. As the topography of Virdifield may have changed over the last 2,000 years, we cannot be sure that the burn always ran through the bog, but the significance of deposits near streams is well known. Further evidence of ritual in the landscape at Virdifield is evident from other finds from the same area, and the search of the Shetland Museum database offered an exciting discovery. Near to where the ard was found, another peat cutter in 1999 uncovered one of Shetland's finest polished felsite axes. You can see it's white, but that's because it's been leached with the acid from the peat. These are often dark or grey, dark black or grey with speckled. Since there was no evidence of wear on this axe, it may have been set for ceremonial purposes, never intended for use, but rather as a ritual offering. Votive offerings of polished stone is well known in Shetland, with numerous similar finds in the museum collection of felsite axes and the unique assemblage of 54 highly polished Shetland knives. These were all buried in peat high up in the hills. A set of 19 knives were stacked side by side, buried on the summit of Stourborough Hill and Walls. This is just 3 of these lovely tools. And likewise, votive deposits of this kind are found in Denmark and appear to correspond with the deposition of ploughs. Professor Glob suggests that Danish ards are contemporary with the fully polished flint axes also found in the moor. A closer survey of the Virdifield area revealed a prehistoric field boundary, a prehistoric house of unknown date, and a cist of probable Bronze Age date. The spot where the yard was found lay approximately 500 metres inland from the house, within a dip in the boggy landscape. This area and the shadow of the hills may have previously been arable, but later came under threat from the encroaching heathland. Was the deposition of the yard a gift to appease the weather gods? Glob suggests that the Danish ploughs may have been an offering to higher powers, perhaps after the first cultivation in spring, in order to ensure fertility and happiness. Ploughing scenes from northern European rock art from the Bronze Age suggests the importance of the occasion and the act of ploughing. The ploughman here is often depicted with an erect phallus, symbolizing the unity of fertilizing Mother Earth as well as human potency. Looking further south to Scotland, the tradition of offering ard parts is also known, although the locations appear to be different to those in Shetland. While an ard from picked snow and an ard beam from Loch Maben had been buried, 3 ard stilts have been discovered built into the fabric of dwellings, as noted in the Iron Age cranach sites in Scotland, including Milton Loch and Oak Bank cranach on Loch Tay. The ard stilts from these cranach sites were comparable in date to the Virdifield examples being offered during the Iron Age period. And while studying ritual behaviour in Iron Age Britain, archaeologist J.D. Hills confirms that certain classes of objects appear to have been particularly selected. He notes that querns are given a special place because of their distinct and important associations with food manufacture. Hill's study looks at the ritual behaviour evident in Iron Age sites in Wessex, where various deposits, including querns, appear to have been placed in pits. And interestingly, excavations of an Iron Age settlement here in Kebbister in Shetland revealed several pits located outside the buildings, one of which contained 2 saddle querns and various quern rubbers. This evidence suggests a shared cultural tradition between the opposite ends of the British Isles. Looking at the Shetland material being deposited, especially objects pertaining to the tilling of the land, the parallels can be found in Scotland, northern Germany, the Netherlands, and Denmark. These offerings include wooden art parts, spades, yokes, and querns. Agricultural tools, including yokes, have also been discovered in the peat bogs of Ireland. And while these tools are required for the preparation of the soil, other votive deposits relate more directly to the food production and storage. A number of vessels containing traces of foods and the remains of sacrificial animals were found in the peat bogs of Denmark. Professor Glob reports wooden vessels being offered into bogs over a considerable period, including a trough thought to be for seed corn. And amongst the Shetland collection was a wooden trough, previously thought to be medieval in date, seen here. This trough of scoop-like shape is carved from a single piece of conifer or silver birch. Found in deep peat, it was part of the Borough collection, so unfortunately little information was recorded, or even from which parish in the island it was discovered. This trough is one of just 3 wooden vessels known from the Shetland Isles, of which one is in the National Museum in Edinburgh. All were found in deep moor. A sample from the Shetland trough was sent for radiocarbon dating and returned a date of 135 BC, placing it again in the Iron Age, contemporary with the majority of the artifacts in this study. A comparable trough, which is also rectangular, was found in Stornoway and was dated to 500 BC, and the bowl from Bracadale Skye was also dated to the Iron Age period. Glob notes that thousands of vessels containing food have been discovered in the marshlands of Denmark, including with these are legs of meat and gruel. One ard stilt from a bog in Denmark was found alongside some early Iron Age pottery, and 4 pleats of human hair, which were tied together in a circle, perhaps signifying the human and agricultural cycle, the cycle of life. Glob indicates that deposits of pottery, food, and agricultural tools form only part of the sacrificial rite, and human remains may also be included as offerings to ensure a good harvest or to thank governing deities who preside over them. These well-preserved bodies are often naked and show signs of being executed before burial, including the famous Talent Man, which Professor Glob published. A recent gazetteer of Scottish bog bodies has listed 5 discoveries of human remains in Shetland, including the report of a woman's naked body found by a peat cutter in Fulla in 1883. Uncovered from deep moor at a depth of 6 feet, the body was said to have lain there for hundreds of years and was subsequently placed back where it was found. Tantalizing indeed. So now to sum up, these components of everyday life listed above appear to have been taken on symbolic role as metaphors for regeneration, not only for the land, but also the fertility of the community. Specialist in European prehistory, Professor Richard Bradley suggests these offerings associated with agricultural produce laid a special significance on the land as well as the people. These, he states, are a series of rituals that stress the importance of food production in Iron Age society, and the deposition of agricultural equipment ensured the fertility of the crops was protected. Bradley goes as far to suggest that every stage in the process of food production was ritualized during this period. Having excavated various sites in the Western Isles, Iron Age specialist Ian Armott suggests religion, superstition, and ritual permeated all aspects of life within Iron Age society, from ploughing the field to the building of homes. His research revealed a profusion of ritual activity focused around the house, including deposits of animal and human remains within the walls and the floors, all of them boundaries to the outside world. This theme of depositional ritual in Scotland can be traced back to the late Bronze Age and early Iron Age, and includes smashed pots, broken querns, bronze artifacts, as well as human and animal remains. And Narmot noted a broken ploughshare and a human skull in the fabric of wheelhouse in Lewis, in keeping with ritual behaviour, and often noted as a special offering when the house was abandoned. Human remains were also discovered in corn storage pits at Danebury Hillfort in Hampshire. Bradley proposes this category of deposition suggests a powerful link with the concept of regeneration, symbolised in the seed corn stored there. This, he states, parallels with the querns placed in pits, as noted here in Cabister, and the offerings of food and agricultural equipment found in the bogs of northern Europe. The evidence gathered in this study would suggest that Iron Age Shetlanders also shared in this belief system. The deposition of items covered in this study may have served two purposes in Iron Age Shetland. Climate change noted in the Bronze Age, with cooler and wetter conditions, was shortening the agricultural cycle. Soil deterioration noted at Cabister and the Scod of Brewster suggests overproductivity, and this may well have led to pressures on arable zones. In fact, it was suggested that the Scod of Brewster was abandoned in 1550 BC for these very reasons. In areas like Yell and Virdifield, where there are large swathes of heathland, the arable pockets of land were slowly being encroached, and so coming under increasing pressure. With a rising population needing to be nourished, perhaps Iron Age Shetlanders would invest in these rites to appease the higher powers or weather deities in an attempt to halt these conditions and improve crop production. Or, as Professor Glob suggests, the population was maintaining the fertility of the land and the people by engaging in springtime rituals involving breaking the earth and the ploughing of the first furrow. So in conclusion, here is the summary of the items from my study. You can see, other than the axe handle with the leather thonging, the dates all sit well within Shetland's Iron Age period. The collection of implements described tonight represent a range of everyday objects, and they've all been well used by someone in the past. By their eventual deposition into the peat bog, they are afforded another meaning, representing an investment for the future fertility of not only the coming harvest, but the community involved in its produce. And by recognizing this ritual behavior, we can gain a deeper understanding of the cultivation practices and belief systems of Iron Age Shetlanders. They were not isolated in their beliefs, but were secure in a cultural tradition that extended across the North Atlantic region. The last slide here shows other wooden items from the moor in the Shetland Museum collection that weren't radiocarbon dated in this study, including a plate from Walls, a scoop from Aishness, and a lovely spoon here found in Unst, and bog butter in a leather bag from Yale. I'm not sure I'd fancy this on my toast in the morning, but these studies have also afforded us a deeper understanding of all these artifacts. Many have proved to be from a much earlier period than first thought, and from what was once considered to be quite mundane, everyday objects. This research has revealed a group of items much older and richer in history than anyone could have imagined, and we now have a much better understanding of the lives and the belief systems of those who touched them. So thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. And if anybody has any, like if there've been more finds of these kind that I haven't heard of, I'd be very happy to hear of anything, because this research was done in 2012. So it's a few years since I did the research. But thank you for listening.